Time to put UFC 248 officially in the books. Ariel Helwani, Marc Raimondi, Brett Okamoto here in Las Vegas. They are breaking down the octagon behind us. That means it's time to wrap this bad boy up. And nice of you to show up to one of these, Marc. Usually you don't come to the post. You're by now at one of the clubs here in Las Vegas doing your thing, so I appreciate your presence here this evening.
Figured I'd grace you guys with my presence.
Yes, thank you.
People demand it.
You know, sometimes you got to give the people they want.
Yeah, so let me ask you a legitimate question right off the bat.
Yes, please do.
Who won the main event between Israel Adesanya and Yoel Romero this evening?
Well, Israel Adesanya won. We just saw it with our own eyes.
Well, in your opinion,
decision, 48-47, 48-47, 49-46.
Who did you score it for, Marc?
I actually scored it for Yoel Romero, and what's funny is that I've actually scored Yoel Romero's last 3 fights, all for Romero.
No kidding.
And he's lost
Wow.
every single one of them. Very strange. But honestly, there was so much inactivity in this fight that it was very hard to really score in my mind. But as far as, like, if you're talking about damage, I mean, I thought Romero won at least the first 2 rounds.
And worth noting, Israel did in fact win the fight according to the judges. He won via unanimous decision. Did you agree with the judges?
I think this was one of those fights where they couldn't get it wrong, honestly. I mean, it was so much inactivity. And look, Yoel Romero, we've seen this before. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I feel like it's pretty obvious. You had a specific game plan, and if you're going to go with that specific game plan, you have to accept the risks that come with it, and that is when you are so inactive, you are really relying on not only your defense to make sure that that guy does not touch you, but that the judges are keen on that. They know that the other guy's not touching you, and that when you do explode and you do connect, that is weighing more than other longer forms of activity, or at least perceived activity from your opponent. So I think that the criticism from Dana White and potentially some other fans and some observers that I've talked to about Yoel Romero's game plan on this is a little warranted. I mean, if this is your last title shot, which it could be at age 42, I said before the fight, I didn't think this guy was going to waste a whole lot of time trying to wrestle. He didn't waste a whole lot of energy doing anything. I mean, he just expended 0 energy in this fight. So I don't think Yoel Romero can be crying too much about the judge's decision tonight.
Yeah, the first 90 or so seconds were utterly bizarre. Shades of Anderson Silva versus Damian Maia back at UFC 112 in April of 2010 in terms of a very frustrating to watch middleweight title fight. Up until this point, probably the weirdest middleweight title fight I've ever seen. This might have surpassed it.
So this was actually the least amount of combined significant strikes in a middleweight title fight since that fight between Silva and Damian Maia all the way back at UFC 112. I think this had 88 combined significant strikes. That one had 71, courtesy, of course, of ESPN Stats.
We're talking about fights in which a guy hid behind a referee, Anderson Silva and Damian Maia. We're talking about a fight in which Nick Diaz actually laid down on the octagon.
Yes.
And we're saying that this one might have been even weirder than both of those.
Weird.
That's saying something.
Very
Now,
weird.
as far as Izzy's stock and, just the overall aura surrounding him, his brand, he was one of the darlings of the sport just like 2 days ago, right? Featured all over the place on ESPN, people talking about him as a potential new face of the sport. How much damage, in your opinion, Brett, did he do to himself tonight?
I think short term he did a little bit, and long term it won't matter. I think you move on. We're already talking about Paulo Costa. Paulo's at the press conference. He's doing the interviews. He's saying, my fight's not going to look like that, and it's not going to. I mean, that fight's going to look completely different. I think this is one of those cases, and, I saw Izzy and his team briefly. I didn't actually formally interview them, but they all kind of felt the same, and that's, sometimes you just got to get a win. We added Yoel Romero's name to our resume. He came with a certain game plan. We weren't willing to just engage in his game plan and run at him. So we did what we needed to do. We won on every scorecard, and so it is what it is. We're going to move on, and there will be brighter days ahead for Izzy. I really don't think it's going to hurt his stock much, if at all.
And just to quickly piggyback off of that, I see some tweets and some commentary that, he's not worthy of the hype, that he's not good. Spare me all that nonsense. The guy's 8-0 in the UFC, fastest ever to get to 8-0. Just had the fight of the year in 2019, knocked out Robert Whittaker. I know people are upset, and rightfully so. You paid a lot of money to be here, but spare me the nonsense that he's not worthy of the hype, that he's not as good as we all think he is. He is as good. He just didn't have the best fight, and at the end of the day, it takes 2 to tango. Now, is it Paulo Costa next? That seems to be the thing that we can all agree on, right? There's no other choice, not a Jared Cannonier or anyone like that, correct?
No, it has to be Paulo Costa next, and that will be a completely different fight for Adesanya, of course, and it'll probably be more of the fight that we kind of expect from Adesanya, not the Romero matchup, but which, really turned out to be Adesanya's worst performance in the UFC. But he won the fight, like Brett said. And I guess if you can just get through Romero, no matter how you do it, you got to be okay with that.
Yeah, and that fight would be notable. It would be just the second time in UFC history that two undefeated male fighters fight for a belt. The first time, UFC 98, Rashad Evans against Lyoto Machida. That was a great one, of course, won by Lyoto Machida, the beginning of the Machida era. Now let's talk about the co-main event. Let's talk about something good here. Going into tonight, I thought Holly Holm versus Miesha Tate back at UFC 196 was the greatest female fight in UFC history. Certainly female title fight. I think Zhang Weili versus Joanna Jedrzejczyk may have surpassed it. Eventually won by Jedrzejczyk via split decision. What an amazing fight. What an incredibly close fight. How did you score it, Marc?
Scored it for Zhang 3-2.
Okay.
48-47.
What about you, Brett?
Same.
Yeah.
3-2.
Do you guys feel the same as I do about how great this fight is? I feel like it might be one of the best that we've ever seen.
Yeah, the Tate Holm fight was great because it was very dramatic in the end. The way that Tate was able to take Holm down in the 4th round and choke her out when she was down on the scorecards. Fifth round, yeah, when she was down on the scorecards. This one was all action from the very start. It was the stakes were so high. I feel like every exchange could either win the fight or turn the tide of the fight. It was just, I mean, edge of your seat action the entire way. For all 5 rounds, it was an incredible fight.
It's easy to contrast it with the main event, but I'm going to do so anyway. In the main event, neither guy was willing to take a risk. The co-main event, it was nonstop risk-taking. It was every time they were going in, they were both getting touched up. But it was two women who were absolutely hell-bent on winning that fight. And every exchange, it was like this seesaw of like, oh, now Joanna's up, now Weili's up, and they had to continue to keep going. And it was just that there was a need for action in that fight because every time they collided, the momentum would switch. I thought they both made adjustments. I thought they both showed heart. We hadn't seen Weili Zhang in the 4th and 5th rounds. She did it against someone who has done it multiple times, who is a veteran of it in Joanna Jedrzejczyk. So, I mean, one of the questions that we asked online is where does this rank all time in UFC title fights? And of course, you always got to have a recency bias, not get too carried away, breathe a little bit. But I think that this is easily top 10, and I think it could be top 7 title fight in the entire history of the UFC.
How about this stat? Yoel Romero landed 40 significant strikes in the entire fight tonight. Weili Zhang, Joanna Jedrzejczyk had 40 strikes each combined, significant strikes, in the 4th round alone.
Oh, my gosh.
You've just been studying stats over there?
Yeah.
Where are these coming from? Andrew Davis
ESPN
texting these
stats
to you
and
in your
info.
pocket or something?
Yeah, the whole fight was fought in a phone booth, back and forth. That hematoma on Joanna's forehead was pretty nasty. Shades of Marc Hominick or Hasim Rahman, if you recall those ones. They were both transported to a local hospital, so we didn't hear much from them afterwards other than what they said in the cage. But massive credit to both of them. And I would suspect that both of you agree that the winner of the Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas fight on April 18th is next for Zhang Weili. Would that be what you're thinking as well?
Yeah, I think that's it, right? Especially because we know, Dana White mentioned that Tatiana Suarez is still injured, still can't compete. I mean, she would be the only one, and even if she were healthy, she just hasn't been active enough. She hasn't accumulated the wins. One thing I do want to say is that, it wasn't that long ago that I really thought that Joanna should probably just go to 125. It seemed like she was having a hard time making 115. It's like, what is there left? You were there, you conquered it for a while, and you lost. Like, go ahead and go up to 125. I've done a complete 180 now. I mean, after watching her make weight this week, it seems like she's figured out a good process for it. It seems like this was one of her better weight cuts. She looked very healthy on the scale, and even though she's 0-4 in her last 4 title fights, she was 1 round away from winning the Strawweight championship. So it's going to take a while for her to get back, but I'm still interested, I guess, in Joanna is what I'm saying, because I feel like when a former champion loses 4 title fights in a row, sometimes, okay, well, what's left for them? What changes are they going to make? I'm not so sure that she needs to make changes. I think she can continue to be in the Strawweight division.
I would argue that even in a losing effort tonight, this was one of her greatest performances in any division in the UFC. I thought she was phenomenal tonight.
All right, very quickly before we go, there are a bunch of great performances on this card. How about Neil Magny coming back from the long layoff? How about Sugar Sean O'Malley making a statement after his 2-year layoff? Anyone that you want to spotlight before we go?
Rodolfo Vieira had an incredible performance. He got kicked in the eye. His eye was completely shut. Decided to take down Safirbek Safarov and choke him out just like that. I mean, it was just maul the guy. As soon as he got hit in the eye, just turned it on and mauled him.
Yeah. I mean, O'Malley was definitely the one that stuck out to me, and it was a quick fight, so it's like, how much can you really take from it? But I think you can take a couple things. One is that every person that I've talked to around O'Malley says the thing that makes him special is his ability to perform when the lights are brightest. And he showed the 2 years off, coming back in, headlining the ESPN portion of this card, that he was up for that, and that he actually gets better the brighter the spotlights are. And, Tim Welch, his trainer, saying one of the big things that we did during this time off was we added a lot of muscle mass, and that's going to lead to more finishes. And O'Malley just looks spectacular tonight. And he's got a long ways to go, and I'm not saying we should match him up with the top 10 yet, but that was about as impressive as you could have ever written it up for him.
All right. Up next for the UFC, they go to Brasilia in 7 days. They'll be there for Kevin Lee versus Charles Oliveira. What a great fight that is going to be, although we did say the same thing about Romero versus Adesanya going into that. I feel confident in saying Lee versus Charles Oliveira is going to be better than the main event that we saw this evening. Looking forward to that. For now, though, we are out of time. For Marc, Brett, our entire crew here in Las Vegas, thank you so much for watching our coverage all week long from here in Sin City. We will see you later this week.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.